So thank you, everybody, and welcome to the presentation on the Benjamin A. Gilman Scholarships, because there's more than one, to study abroad, study and intern abroad. This is my first time giving this presentation. I just became a Gilman advisor late last semester, and so I am familiar with a lot of the key components, but now I'm learning all of the finer details, and so I'll be learning about this session a little bit with you. And joining me today is also Priscilla Ortiz, as I mentioned. So she's not only one of our Global Titan ambassadors, which is a volunteer in our office who has done a SAGE program, but also has been and is a Gilman recipient. Priscilla, do you want to introduce yourself a little bit?
Yes, hi everyone. My name is Priscilla. I am a Global Titan ambassador, and I also received the Gilman Scholarship for the spring 2021 term, but I applied it to a summer program. I was allowed to do that due to the pandemic, and I applied it to a virtual program because of the pandemic. It was still ongoing, so I used it for a virtual program, which worked out in the best of my interest, which was great.
Yeah. Thank you, Priscilla. And I forgot to introduce myself. So I am Eileen, and I am going to be your Study Abroad and Global Engagement or SAGE advisor. So if you have any questions on studying abroad or interning abroad or teaching English in another country or anything like that, I'm the person on this campus to go to. So nice to meet everybody. Okay. So a little bit of information about the Gilman. So first of all, it is a program that is offered through the U.S. Department of State. And so it is provided with funding from the U.S. government to in line with some of their best interests. And it is offered, it's administered through the Institute of International Education, or IIE. It's an organization that just, they have all this pot of money and the scholarship, and they're the ones that kind of help disperse it and things like that. And so it is one of the most well-known and largest study abroad scholarships out there. It can be quite competitive, but luckily our campus does have a really nice history of getting them, as Priscilla is here to demonstrate. Some fun stats real quick is that for this fall semester, we accepted 30 students to study abroad, and 1 in 4 students was a Gilman recipient. So that's just something that I kind of want to highlight. So while this is a really big scholarship, it is competitive, our students do get them. So I hope that encourages you already to go ahead and apply. And so a little bit more about the Gilman Scholarship. It is sponsored through the Bureau of Educational and Cultural Affairs, or ECA. Again, also part of the State Department. Also, the State Department also has some really good resources. They have the USA Office of Study Abroad. And so you should definitely check out the resources that are on your government's page, because they are trying to promote things like cultural exchange, global understanding, and things like that. Okay. All right. Some of Gilman's program impact. So 47% of recipients have been first-generation college students, with 65% representing racial or ethnic minorities. Over 31,000 usually are U.S. undergraduates who demonstrate financial needs. So we're going to get into that in the eligibility requirement, because one of the requirements is that you are a Pell Grant recipient, not just eligible, but receiving the Pell Grant. And Gilmans have been awarded to students studying abroad in over 150 countries, and also in over 1,300 U.S. institutions have been represented, from Cal State Fullerton to all the other higher education institutions that are out there. All right, let's talk about the scholarship funding. Okay, and so recipients can receive up to $5,000. So that was another thing I wanted to say. So for those students who were accepted for the fall 2021 semester, on average, they received, for like a semester program, $4,000. On average. So that's a really good chunk of change, and can help a student's study abroad program a lot. And so there are different terms that you can get the Gilman for. You can get them for fall terms, you can get them for spring terms, summer, winter, as well as the academic year. Okay. Let me just go through a couple other things here, just make sure. Okay. The other thing too is, so Gilman has a main Gilman scholarship, but they also have lots of sub scholarships as well. And those are things that I can help identify you depending on, what you're studying, where you're hoping to go. But one such additional scholarship that they do offer, so this is considered a supplemental scholarship, is the Critical Need Language Award. And so you can be awarded up to an additional $3,000 if you are studying one of these, plus the access to the proficiency testing, if you are studying one of these languages which is identified as a critical need. So these tend to be languages that most people, most U students are not necessarily speaking. And so these are ones that they need more people to study, again, hopefully in line with helping things like our government, filling in like federal jobs, things like defense, or working at at the State Department and things like that. So if you are studying any of these languages, you can apply for this additional scholarship. One fun fact is a couple of years ago, we had a student who was studying in Japan on one of our programs for a whole year. So not only did he get the Gilman scholarship, which was actually $5,000, he did get the critical need language scholarship. So he got a total of $8,000 to study in Japan. And this was, I think, 2017, 2018. So not that long ago. So it can happen. So I just want to promote that that's out there as well. Okay, so in addition to the money that you get to study abroad, why else should you apply for the Gilman? Well, Gilman alumni actually get a lot of benefits. So one of the ones, again, because it is offered through our State Department, is that you get non-competitive eligibility, or NCE. And so what that technically is alumni of the Gilman program are eligible for 12 months of non-competitive eligibility hiring status with the federal government, right? So all of this is, you can think of this as a really, really good way through study abroad to just try to be recruiting people, right? You don't have to have an interest in working in the federal government, but that's a bonus, okay? You also get to join the Gilman Scholar Network. They do have an alumni ambassador program. You get access to seminars and career workshops. I think Priscilla can kind of attest to that. She usually gets invited to certain things, or we'll get an email that says Gilman recipients are invited to these special events. So you have access to that, networking opportunities, and skill development. Priscilla, do you want to talk about some of the things that you joined or have been invited to since having received the Gilman?
Yeah, so I've actually been attending the US foreign policy seminars. So they have speakers in those different careers come and talk about the US foreign policy relations with, let's say, Africa or Asia. The most recent one that I went to was the one with Africa. And I'm interested in that because I'm interested in going down the US diplomat route. So that's been a great opportunity for me.
Right.
And I've gotten to network as well with other students.
So the Gilman is working.
Mhm.
Awesome. Thank you, Priscilla. Okay. And so let's talk a little bit about eligibility. Please note that this is the Gilman eligibility right here. And so first of all, you must be a US citizen in order to apply for this scholarship. There are other study abroad scholarships. So for example, not all of our students at Cal State Fullerton are US citizens. And so there are other opportunities for funding if this isn't applicable to you. If you have any questions, feel free to ask me. But the one that I'm having a session on later at noon allows US citizen and permanent residents to apply. So you can also check that one out. It's at noon. It's for the Fund for Education Abroad, the FEA scholarship. But for the Gilman, you must be a US citizen. You must be an undergraduate student. And this is the big one. So students don't often know, but you must be a federal Pell Grant recipient. And sometimes, some of you might be thinking, how do you not know you're a Pell Grant recipient? Some students are like, I get financial aid and I don't distinguish what kind it is, right? In this case, you might want to because you want to know if you're eligible for the Gilman or not. And if you have any questions on how you can check that, usually you can go into your Titan portal under your financial awards and you'll see Pell Grant or not, or Cal Grant A and things like that. If you do have any other questions, you can definitely reach out to the financial aid office just for clarification, and then they'll be able to confirm or tell you. Okay. The other thing about doing the Gilman is it must be for a credit bearing program. What does that mean? that means that you are taking classes for credit on that program. We do offer volunteer programs or other non-credit type programs, such as like presenting research or, just doing like a seminar and stuff like that. That's not applicable. You must be in some way gaining a transcript, transferring credit, and things like that. This one's a big one to note right now due to COVID, and there's a couple of slides later to kind of go over a little bit more. But if you apply for the Gilman, the country that David, question.
Yeah, I just have a really good question. So
Sure.
I know for a fact that I don't apply for the federal Pell Grant recipient, but in regards to the Critical Need Language Award, do you have to also be applicable? Like, do you also need the federal
It's
Pell Grant?
part and parcel. So
Okay.
that critical need one is part of that, but thank you for actually asking. There's a separate one. So the students kind of get these two confused. There's a separate scholarship that has the same similar name that's called the Critical Language Scholarship. That's entirely different. That one's a summer program that you join, and it's like 10 weeks, I believe, and you get like the program fees and your travel stipend paid for. That one's completely different separate from this one. So that one you might want to check it out. I can put it so you can check that one out.
Yeah, and you said it was called the Critical what award?
Language Scholarship. I'm putting it in the chat right now. Otherwise known as the CLS. I'm not sure. I don't know that you have to be a Pell Grant recipient on that one, but you might want to check that one. But that one is a summer specific program. That is separate from, let me go, I don't know if I can go back on this one. Yeah, that one is different from this one, which is technically a critical need language. So the abbreviation for this is the CNL.
Okay.
Or CNLA, technically. Does that help?
Yeah, it does. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Just wanted to get that clarification.
Yeah, no, I'm glad you asked. Thank you so much. Okay, so then going back into the eligibility requirements, you do have to be applying to a country or area where the travel advisory is a level 1 or 2. What does that mean? I don't know if you know, but the State Department actually ranks each and every country by a travel advisory. 1 is the lowest, meaning that it is completely safe to go. There's nothing you need to worry about. And then it just kind of progresses. 2 to 3. 4 is do not travel. Okay, so there are countries for various reasons, whether it's politics, war, things going on right there that designated as a level 4. However, there are some countries that are given that designation right now because of COVID. So we'll talk about that. So, there are certain countries where if your interest lies there, you may not be able to apply it to. So that's one of the things that you'll need to check, and you can do that through the State Department and check the country. The one thing that's been kind of messing with our students lately, especially the ones that were supposed to go in the fall, is you can be given the Gilman, and then for various reasons, the travel advisory does jump. It can go from a 1 day to a 2 to 3, 4 for varying reasons. Again, political unrest, war, things like that, COVID. And so that's something that right now our students really need to be wary of. That, pre-COVID, this wasn't such a big deal, but now you need to be very, very flexible with the Gilman and not only rely on the Gilman as your means of study abroad. Okay, I'll get into that more if you need me to. One other new development too is that there is no longer a minimum length requirement. So the Gilman used to have to be, in order to get it for your program needed to be a certain number of weeks. I already forgot what it was, maybe like 3 weeks, technically 21 days. They did away with that. So it can be a 2-week program, 1-week program where you're, a winter program where you're getting like a class and things like that. So now it is applicable. The other thing that this gentleman is saying in the side is virtual programs are also included now. So virtual internships, hybrid programs, things like that. So that's what Priscilla was saying, where, because of COVID, she couldn't go abroad anymore. So, and she needed to use the Gilman. So she was able to do it through a virtual program as well. David, do you have another question?
I did not. I don't know why my thing is still up.
Oh, you can lower the hand. With your reactions, there might be. So I just want to make sure I got any questions.
Oh yeah, lower hand. Sorry about that.
There you go.
Yeah,
all good. You're fine. Awesome. And so so those are just some of the eligibility requirements. Okay. In terms of submitting the application, so this kind of goes back to what I was saying regarding the travel advisories. So when you're submitting your application, the Gilman Committee, they will review programs in locations that are only level 3 and 4 due to COVID. So I think I currently have a student right now who's in Ghana who, when she applied, it was like a level 1. And when she got accepted, it was a level 1. She's already there. She's probably in like her first or second week of class. And all of a sudden, the State Department elevated it, I think, to 3, which puts it in that red zone, I think, for COVID. So I think she's okay there, but she has to do check-ins now. She has to report to Gilman how she's doing on a weekly basis. So that's technically, it sounds like a lot of work, but that's how much your government kind of looks after you while you're abroad. Okay, you're their Gilman scholar, so they're going to take care of you. If they become a recipient, the location must be level 1 or 2 before the program start date. So sometimes it, like I said, because of different things, it goes like this, and you want to make sure it's down here. If it doesn't, which happened to my student, we're going to have to look at backup options, whether you choose, if there's time for you to reapply to another program, whether you do a virtual program like Priscilla did, or you defer, like I had one student have to do. And if you can't go fall, go spring. If you can't go spring, maybe summer or fall. So those are some of the options that I can navigate with you. So again, having to be very flexible in this time of wanting to study abroad in the middle of a pandemic. Okay. And these are the travel advisories that I mentioned. So 1 is exercise normal precautions, 2, exercise increased caution, 3 is reconsider travel there, and then 4 is a do not travel. Okay. In terms of the virtual program eligibility, online courses based outside the US is fine. Institutions, exchange, or providers, faculty led. So that's if our faculty have programs that are being taught virtually, which we have. Actually, international internships, which are great. Our students do love those global internships, language programs, and I'm not sure what the open to proposals unit is, but and that is eligible until summer 2022. And so, Priscilla, would you like to speak a little bit about the virtual programs that you've done, because she's done 2?
Yeah, well, I applied to, well, there was one program, it was free. That was the Tübingen program, that's in Germany. And that was a free virtual program for, it was open to all students. And I didn't need to apply to Gilman for that one since it was free. However, the one that I needed to apply to Gilman to was the provider program, and that was through Kappa. And this course was in Florence, Italy. It was a virtual program as well. And fortunately, with that course, it was a psychology course which counted toward my major. And I was able to take off some units off of the major requirements, which was a nice thing. And the Gilman covered the whole cost. Virtual programs aren't as expensive. So that was kind of nice as well.
Awesome. Thank you. Okay. Moving on. Something else in terms of eligibility. I wouldn't have put this slide here, but I would have put it with with next to the CLN and things like that too. But we do have a Gilman McCain scholarship as well, named after the late Senator John McCain. And so it's a $5,000 scholarship for child dependents of active duty service members. So for example, if your parent or guardian is currently serving in the military and is currently on duty, you are eligible for this scholarship as well. Again, US citizen, undergraduate student, credit bearing program in a travel advisory level country of 1 or 2. This does have some of the minimum program length requirements, 3 weeks, 21 days, or 2 weeks, or 14 days for a 2-year institution like a community college. So we fit the first part. And must be a recipient of any type of the title, what would that be for? Title, I can't read that. Title 4, yeah, Title 4. Title 4. Title 4 federal financial aid. And again, dependent child of an active duty military member, Air Force, Army, Marine Corps, Navy, and Coast Guard. Okay, there are, in addition to the regular Gilman, the critical need language scholarship, as well as the McCain, some countries also have separate Gilman. Wales, Portugal, I believe is one. Israel has one, which we actually do have a program you can look into that goes to Israel. So sometimes the Gilman has specific country ones as well. Not all, there's like 4 or 5, but Okay, let's talk application real quick. So it's a two-step process, okay? So there's going to be your component and my component as your advisor. So not only am I your study abroad and global engagement advisor on this campus, I have, like I said, become now the Gilman advisor. So I'm going to be helping you with this. So your student application, you have a couple of things to do. So you're going to have to submit your the program information. You're going to have to write quite a few essays, submit unofficial transcripts, and you have to choose me as well as the financial advisor on our campus, who is, I'll put that name in the chat, Monica Colasso. And so we're both the advisors for the Gilman on this, okay? And then my component, my job is to make sure I certify, meaning you're gonna go submit everything into a portal, and I'm just gonna go in that portal and like check off things and make sure things are good. So that's what I do. And there are two of us. So there's me, and then the person in the financial aid office who does. And I'll put her name on the chat here. So Monica. Okay. So she's the person in the financial aid office who is the financial aid Gilman advisor. Okay. So what's included? I did say that there were quite a few essays to write. So I believe in total there are 3. And Priscilla's like nodding her head. She's like, I remember these. One thing to note, 3 essays sounds like it's a lot, but something that I learned from my colleague, which I thought made a really good point, is so when I wanted to study abroad, I thought I had to do it the hard way and work. So I got a job as a waitress and I worked for like a year and a half just to be able to afford my, $10,000+ study abroad program. I wasn't eligible for the Gilman, but for some students, if you are, 3 essays, like I worked like a year plus trying to save money. 3 essays, like you could get that done if you did it really seriously, like in a day, a good weekend, plus drafting and things like that. The payout is pretty good considering the time you have to put into a really good essay. So, if you were smart, that's probably a really good way to justify your time to try to earn money towards your study abroad program. Okay, so the first one is that there is that statement of purpose. Okay, and so there are different components to the personal interview, you talking about your goals, and then also meeting challenges. Priscilla, do you want to talk about this since you actually wrote your essay and any advice that you can give on this section?
Yeah. Well, for me, I had to really think about why I wanted to study abroad. Beyond the application, because this one had to be really in depth and genuine. It had to be like you had to like dig in deep and like find your truest self. And for me, I started off with saying why I wanted the scholarship and what I was using it for. So I talked about how I'm a first generation student. Come from an underrepresented background, Hispanic, and I also talked about the program I was applying to, which was the University of Constance, and excuse me. And I talked about how this program would allow me to take unique courses that counted towards my major and towards my minor as well. And I talked about the goals that I was planning on meeting. So when I was doing my research for the University of Constance, I saw that they had a buddy program and they had different programs for international students that were available to me. And I put that on the application. I said how I'm very interested in doing this buddy program and building that exchange with the German students. And, I just talked about everything that I could list, all the research that I had done. And I also talked about my challenges, which one of the big ones was getting my family's approval and studying abroad. So I talked about the process of how I met with advisors, how I brought my parents with me to different meetings. And, I basically showed Gilman that I was capable of receiving the scholarship and that I really needed it. So, yeah, I would just recommend that.
Awesome.
Mhm.
Thank you, Priscilla. Like as Priscilla was saying, like this is Gilman's only chance to get to know you. I need to clarify. There's no interview component. This is the interview. Like the essay is the only way they're gonna read about you. And so this is your opportunity to tell your story. So all of those things about who you are that maybe sometimes we feel the rest of the world doesn't care about. Like for me being a Filipino American, maybe as a woman, who are you? Put that on there and talk about how it might be a challenge for you to study abroad, because the Gilman is all about giving access to people who otherwise wouldn't be able to study abroad. Okay, they actually care about those things that we feel the rest of society kind of doesn't. So that's your time to shine and tell them who you are. Okay, all right. So next one. Okay, so here are some questions you can ask yourself, and everyone's going to get a copy of this presentation too. So if whoever is in here, I'll send it to you because we are kind of starting to run out of time, but we do have included here some questions that will help you with your statement of purpose. Okay, because there is the second essay, which is the community impact. Real briefly, Priscilla, do you want to talk about what the scholarship asks of you? Or sorry, this essay asks of you.
Yeah, well, it's listed right here.
Yeah.
What it means to be a U.S. citizen while abroad. So I kind of talked about, to me, what it meant to be a U.S. citizen. And this was around the time, Black Lives Matter movement was happening. And I know there was a lot of unrest. And I did mention that in the essay how, America's not perfect, but, there's students like me and people out there that want to make, America, this diverse and unified community. And then I also talked about the opportunities to be culturally engaged. So again, it's that research portion that you have to do. What program does your university have that can allow you to be culturally engaged? And if not, what are you going to do to make that cultural engagement? And one of the, I kind of mentioned this later on in the essay as well, the seeking opportunities to have meaningful interactions. I talked about how, I'm not only going to go and listen to other students, other German students, but I'm going to ask meaningful questions. So I want to, get to know them. And so that's part of the meaningful interactions.
Right. So basically, this sounds like this is asking you how you're going to be a representative. Because if the State Department is giving you money and to go abroad, you technically become a kind of, unofficial U.S. ambassador in a sense, a U.S. representative, a diplomat in your own way in these countries abroad. And they want to know, if you're going to do a good job representing them. Okay, some more questions to ask, which you'll get in the PowerPoint. And then real quickly, the community impact. So you do have to do a service project. So I'm not going to get into that right now. So what's going to happen is, because I have to make sure I help facilitate a session after this, is I'm going to transfer host capabilities to Priscilla. So she can stay with you here and she can answer any more questions that you have and tell you the rest about the follow-on service project proposal as well. So she can get into that. Okay, because I do want to make sure that I get, and then there's the critical need language. So if you're only doing the regular Gilman, it's 3 essays. If you are considering applying to the critical need language award, it is 4. Okay. And so I do want to jump to the timelines because that's what I want to make sure I touch on before I go. So deadlines and timelines. So there are 2 main application periods. There's the October deadline and then there is the March deadline. Okay. And so it's not necessarily based on your fall or your spring term or things like that. It depends on technically when it starts and the date range. Okay. Because there's multiple types of institutions that have different starts. But if your program is going to start basically from this winter all the way up until the fall, you're going to want to apply for the October deadline. If your program starts probably around May of next year, all the way up until next spring of 2023, then there's also the March 2022 deadline. So applications right now are open, so you can go ahead and apply. And the deadline is October 5th at midnight Pacific. Okay, so if you're going to do anything international, you want to make sure you get your time zones right. And so October 5th is this deadline. Okay, and my deadline to certify your application is the 12th. And then we also have the dates for the next cycle as well. So I want to make sure that I jump through this. Priscilla can help you with application tips. Let me see if there's anything else. Please do follow us on social media. Titans Abroad. I'll put that. Priscilla, can you put that in the chat, please? She's our helper. But I also do recommend following Gilman. I do follow them, so I get the updates. I try to share that with our students when we can. There are videos on the Gilman and the recipients, so you might want to check that out. Okay. And additional resources. So there's even more scholarships out there. So like I said, I'm doing another presentation at noon for the Fund for Education Abroad. That's just another one. And my contact info is here. And then, so Priscilla, can you type in my email address for students that have any other questions following here? But that concludes it for me. We don't need that one. We don't need the flyers. Okay, so those were some of the key things about the Gilman that I wanted to tell you. Really, I want to pass it on to Priscilla because she's actually the recipient and will be able to tell you more about the Gilman and tips in that way. So thank you, everybody. Sorry I have to jump, but Priscilla's here. Thank you.
Okay. All right, thank you, Eileen.
No, thank you.
So I guess I will open up the floor to, well, I guess I'll say my global titan, my story first. So I was originally supposed to study, well, I had originally wanted to do a service learning project, and that was a spring week in the Dominican Republic. But because that was the spring that the pandemic broke out, I had to look at different options. And fortunately, they did tell us that there would be study abroad availability spring 2021, so a year later. And I said, why not do that? So I decided to apply to a German program. It was called CSUIP University of Constance. And it was a perfect program for me because I had my majors that I needed, so psychology and Spanish, and then I also had my minor, which was political science. And you know, I'm very fortunate to have had the Gilman because the Gilman, aside from the work that I had to do, work at multiple jobs and my FAFSA, which leftover financial aid did help me. The Gilman was able to help cover the cost because I did receive the 5,000 scholarship. Um, and basically, essays are very important. So you guys want to make sure you all want to make sure that you start that as soon as possible. And if you need any help, I am here as well to help. I can read through your essay and give you a couple of tips. And I just want to encourage you all to apply because there's so there's so much money that the Gilman wants to give, and it just needs people to apply, and I'm pretty sure you all will get it.